It's Tuesday, March 11th, 2025, and the EV gamble that our government has made has now impacted our food exports and potentially security. We'll talk about that a little bit because the Chinese tariffs on our canola is actually kind of a big deal, and the only tariffs that our government wants to focus on are Donald Trump's tariffs, and that's problematic because, well, there's more than just what Donald Trump is doing in the world, and that's going to impact Canada in a negative way, and our government is more interested in hearing about what Mark Carney thinks, which is just awful. Canada is filling in for missing USAID funding that is now gone, so we're just going to spend a whole lot of money with the Parliament prorogued still. So new leader, but still no transfer of power. We'll see when that happens. No news on that yet either. Yesterday kind of was just Mark Carney going around talking about his new stuff, and we're doing a post-mortem on the Liberal leadership contest. So that's, I mean, all of this stuff is interesting, and it's not, I don't know that we are going to be satisfied with the outcome, because I think that the whole purpose of all of this is to take over Canada even more. So we're not getting any kind of self-governance. We're getting more globalist, top-down nonsense, which is, again, very, very annoying. U.S. debt clock weirdness, and the influencer that I've been not following, but he keeps coming up in my feed. He's got an interesting take on this, and he says, I have no idea what Donald Trump's doing, but I'm interested in finding out. So me too. I also do not know what Donald Trump is up to. And Canada is poking him in the eye, Doug Ford specifically, and we'll see how that goes. I think it's the wrong move for being in a trade war, but we'll talk about that during the trade war part. Tariffs and all the rest. Mark Carney's weird win and the Liberal Party collapses. Yeah, I've got a comparison between the CPC leadership race results and the Liberal leadership race results, and the numbers are shockingly different, like surprising. Hundreds of thousands different, 200,000 different, I think. Trudeau is in bed with a Chinese crime lord named Jin. Carney has brought David Lametti and Marco Mendicino back into the fold, which is just, again, my gosh, right? Jaw-dropping. How many tanks do you think we need, Mr. Carney? So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, here is a reminder that former British Prime Minister, who I don't think she was very popular, is talking about how terrible Mark Carney was for England, and he'll be worse for Canada, and I don't think that she's wrong. Here is just a quick reminder of what we've just put in place in the top leadership position in our country in a very, very, very emergency kind of time. So it's not the right guy at the wrong time. Definitely. Here's old British Prime Minister.
Just wanting to get your thoughts on Mark Carney and your relationship with him while you were Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and any advice you have to Canadians who think he might make a good Prime Minister.
Well, Mark Carney was Governor of the Bank of England, and under his tenure, too much money was printed, which did damage to the British economy and put our economy off track. He, at the last election, endorsed Rachel Reeves' economic policy. She's now become Chancellor. It's been a disaster for Britain. The country is heading for bankruptcy. So I would strongly recommend not backing Mark Carney or his policies on net zero, which have been disastrous for Britain and would be disastrous for Canada.
Do you trust his judgment overall, outside of ideological considerations?
Well, I believe that he made major mistakes in the management of the Bank of England. He has pushed net zero, which has been a disaster, not just for the UK, but for many countries across the world.
Thanks for your time, Prime Minister.
And I don't think that's Liz Truss. It was I can't remember the Prime Minister's name, which is why I just kept calling her Prime Minister. So we'll keep with that. Pierre Poilievre says, make no mistake, Donald Trump will have a big smile on his face as he exploits all of Carney's many conflicts to attack Canadian workers and Canadian jobs, but we Conservatives won't let either of them do that. So this is again tying Mark Carney to Donald Trump. So everybody that you don't like is Donald Trump, including Donald Trump, because they do all sorts of work to make sure Canadians hate Donald Trump, because even Mr. Poilievre doesn't actually want to run against the Liberals, doesn't actually want to talk about anything happening in Canada. He wants to fight an election against mean Donald Trump, orange man bad. And they're all falling into this, and it seems very globalist to me. It seems like the globalists have decided that the real bad guy here is a strong, independent United States, a United States that isn't under the globalist control, right? And so everybody's boogeyman, everybody's bad guy is Donald Trump. And to Canadians, I don't think, man, the rank and file Canadians, people who are not paying very close attention, people who listen to the mainstream media news, they're following all directly for this. They think that Donald Trump is the problem and the real solution is counter tariffs. And it's ridiculous because all we're doing is hurting ourselves. But we'll get to tariffs in a minute. With regards to Carney, again, I think the rank and file Canadians are hoping for the best. And I mean, I don't think anybody really supports the Liberals. But at this point in time, our country is not really interested in change as such. They just want the awfulness to stop. They just want the uncertainty to stop. And people are promising that Carney is going to bring the solution. The mainstream media is. And I suppose the citizens are hoping that that's going to happen. But I already know that this is just going to cause more chaos. I already know that this is going to cause more uncertainty. And so here's an interesting, weird thing about the leadership race between Mark Carney and comparing to Pierre Poilievre, which recently happened, really. Canada Proud says Mark Carney will be installed as prime minister with less than half the votes that Pierre Poilievre got to become leader of the opposition. So 132,000 votes for the Liberals, 295,000 votes for the Conservatives. Do you know what that means? In political standpoint, attention is currency, right? So like in the political world, if nobody's paying attention to you, then your political star is falling, right? You're waning. Your light's going out. Nobody is interested in what you're saying, so less people show up. And the more less people show up, the more oftentimes less people show up, then the less your party has power. And so these people are trying to hold on to power. And this is like the NDP and the Liberals and everybody else, because Mark Carney's going to lead them all, right? And 132,000 votes. So it's very interesting compared to 295,000 votes for Pierre Poilievre. And that's, well, Mark Carney is well behind, but is that going to actually transfer to an election win for Mr. Poilievre, who's a globalist anyway? But is that actually going to transfer? I don't know, because it seems like the globalists just want not Pierre Poilievre, want Mark Carney, but Canadians may not accept him, but they might, as I was saying. Here is Michelle Rempel, and she says, Chrystia Freeland didn't carry her own riding. It wasn't even close. Big question marks for the Liberal Party on this one. So Mark Carney won 1322 points in Chrystia Freeland's riding, and she won 188 points. It doesn't make sense. That's not. Chrystia Freeland is popular in her riding generally, especially if you're comparing to another Liberal like Mark Carney. So this looks rigged. The whole thing looks rigged. Here's Ezra Levant talking about how things seem really strange in Mark Carney's win of the Liberal leadership. Very, very strange indeed. Here we go.
But what if you did 338 districts and every single one Mark Carney won by almost exactly the same margin, plus or minus a couple of points?
Weird.
What are the odds of that? Well, what are the...
So Mark Carney won the overall race by 85%, but apparently he won all of the ridings by that amount too. So they were lazy at rigging it, I guess.
Odds of getting heads in a coin toss 100 times in a row, so small I can't even calculate them. I'm going to calculate them to make my point here. My calculator can't even help that, can't even work on that, but I think it's numbers so...
Oy vey, right? Jeepers creepers, everybody. The whole thing is very, very strange. The calculator thing. If I'm going to do a calculator, I do it on the screen. Come on, Ezra. Jeepers, I'm just in my garage here. You got $1 million operation, man. Jeepers creepers. Israel now. Israel is noticing, right? I mean... I try and stay out of all of this, but I find this shoe on the other foot kind of funny, right? Okay, so this Israel Now account says, hey, Mark Carney, who's that Muslim lady with the hijab doing security for you behind you there? And I watched the video again and I was like, oh yeah, look at her. She's policing other women for not wearing a hijab. Like, holy smokeroni, she's absolutely getting in there and getting, tussling things up. Here we go, watch her. There she is. She's making sure people aren't touching Mark Carney. Don't you touch him, he's a central banker. Don't you know he's a central banker? It's very, very interesting, right? Who is that woman? Is that Al Gawabi? No, I don't think so, right? The Islamophobic something or other. Here is CBC Watcher, and Lisa Raitt says, listen, the reason members of parliament or office holders disclose what they have in their portfolios is so there's a baseline. And I'll let her explain it because Mark Carney, it's 3 minutes. I'll read the rest of the quote. Mark Carney isn't giving Canadians, he's not elected. And so when you become an elected MP, you have to give a disclosure of your assets in order to give a baseline so that people can understand if you've done insider trading, right? If your baseline is $1 million and then after 4 years of being in leadership and some very, very interesting trades, you've increased your wealth by a whole lot, they wouldn't know unless you had a baseline to tell them, right? Like if they come to you and say, hey, listen, I mean, I guess they could look into your trades and see when you made the money, but that would require a whole investigation and like having a forensic accountant go through people's MPs accounts, that's not very trustworthy, right? So doing it before, it's like a prenup, right? Doing it beforehand, that's better. So Mark Carney has insider information. He's had insider information for a long time. He's a central banker in Canada and in England. So he's got all this stuff, assets galore, married to, well, his sister-in-law is a well-to-do elite in England. But he's got all sorts of money, right? And we don't have any clue about any of that money. So it's very, very interesting how much freedom he's got to be able to, I don't know, use that position to his own advantage without anybody being able to figure it out, right? Really. And that's not great. So that's what Lisa Rate's saying. She says, Parliament office holders disclose what they have in their portfolios is to set a baseline to ensure that there's no insider trading on information you may receive as an MP. No one should take advantage of the information that they're privy to in order to make trades. He's got to do it right now. Like, let's go, or like he's got to, she says. He made a joke about it last night, and I didn't appreciate that either, but there's very real reasons why we track it. Joke added at the end of the clip. So it's 3 minutes, and link is in the description if you're interested in that. Jason says, Mark Carney's full deposition at the U.S. House Judiciary Committee. Thanks, Dave. So on April 17th, 2024, which is not that long ago, this is last year, right? Mark Carney, in his capacity as co-chair of GFANZ, was deposed by staff members of the U.S. House Judiciary Committee in their investigation into corporate adoption of and imposition of ESG. Here are some takeaways. There was more of a thread. Hold on, I have to go to the thread. Carney's role as UN Climate Finance Envoy and GFANZ co-chair was predicated on ensuring that firms would commit to net zero policies to effectively decarbonize. He was active in pushing carbon markets, putting a price on carbon emissions as a measurement of whether firms were adhering to the Paris climate goals. I've heard that Mark Carney is actively under investigation by the Department of Justice in the United States, and I don't know if that's true or not, but this kind of lends to Mark Carney is connected to people who are under investigation by this. And so that's makes things more complicated. Like before, Justin Trudeau was a D-bag and didn't like Trump, and Trump didn't like him, and that created its own issues. But if the current prime minister is under current investigation, criminal investigation, or RICO, or racketeering, or whatever investigation this ends up being, that's more complicated, more difficult. And how did he get elected again? He stated his goal, Carney did, back to this, was to develop a common approach for transition plans for financial institutions. And the critical thing that does is incentivizes the financial institutions to do what they do best, which is to think about, if I'm funding either through an investment or lending a reduction in emissions, I'm taking a view on whether that will be successful. He reveals his role in pressing financial institutions to limit lending and funding of both capital and assets if they do not strictly adhere to the goal of limiting climate emissions. He agrees with the statement that more than half of the world's coal reserves need to stay in the ground in order for the world to be in line with the Paris Climate Accords. Carney mentions that a company that does not have a transition pathway to decarbonize is on the wrong side of climate history. He remains adamant that carbon prices are necessary commitments that every country must adopt in order to achieve the goal of net zero. As of April 2024, less than a year ago, he was not living in Canada. He was living in the United Kingdom as an advisor to the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So it was a big deal that Andrew Scheer had dual citizenship. It was a big deal that Stéphane Dion couldn't speak English. It was a big deal that Ignatieff didn't live in Canada and then moved to Canada to become the leader. And now this guy parachutes in last year, moves to Canada, and is now the leader of the country, leader of the Liberal Party, going to be sworn in as prime minister in waiting. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. Sister Catherine says, surprise, just another day, folks. Mark Carney appoints Marco Tanks Medinichino to his be his chief of staff. And so that's interesting. Here's Mark Carney saying that the truckers were raping people. So not only did he request a tank for truckers, I believe that was him, right? He was asking for tanks, or was he the one providing tanks? Ryan says, of course, Mark Carney picked this scumbag Marco Medicino to be his chief of staff. Vile individuals stick together. I remember when MP Dancho went after him for lying about the convoy presenters, and he doubled down saying they were raping people. Yeah, so Marco Medicino, yesterday I was in the Canada Poly private chat. I was saying Marco Medicino is a pro. Like, if you want a chief of staff who's going to do exactly what you say, because he's very loyal, he'll do anything the Liberals tell him to do. He's drank the Kool-Aid through and through. He will go and push anything. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. Anything that Mark Carney tells him to push, he will come in front of that microphone and he will push it 110%. More than that. He will tell you that it is the absolute God's honest truth. And if you don't believe him, you're a criminal. And then when you find out that none of it was true and he was lying about all of it, you realize that he's just really good at talking. And that's all. Like, he will just say anything, and he's allergic to the truth. He breaks out in hives if he says the truth or gets anywhere close to the truth. His throat starts closing up. So if he's talking, he's not telling you the truth, unfortunately. But that's the chief of staff for Mark Carney. Larry Brock is highlighting this as well. Carney recruits Lametti. So, my gosh, remember Lametti? Another disgraced Trudeau Liberal insider. So Medicino and Lametti are back in the fold. This is the same failed attorney general who helped cover up the Liberals' SNC Lavalin scandal and backed the illegal invocation of the Emergencies Act. Now Mark Carney rewards him with a top role, just more corruption. I don't know what role Lametti's being looked at for, but Melissa Lansman says nothing says change like putting two disastrous Trudeau ministers in charge, and the very two who were in large part responsible for the rise in crime in Canada. They passed catch and release bail and house arrest for the most rampant reoffenders, policies that increased violent crime 50%, gun crime 116%, and hate crime by 250%. Hate crime is bullshit. It is a bullshit classification, and the reason it's increased by 250% is because they reclassified what it is to include things that were happening. And I think that the things were happening were previously just like minor things, and now they've turned it into hate crimes. Mel Jolie is also sticking around. She says she thinks that her staying on as foreign minister will help Mark Carney fight Donald Trump. Huh. Weird. That's a weird thing to think. She's been completely awful at what she's done up to now, and there's no indication she's going to get better at her job in the short term. So very, very odd. Terry says, I don't know about the rest of you, but when I want change, I always vote for the party that's currently in power and its old buddies. So Mark Carney says Canada's ready for change. But that's, again, voting for Mark Carney is not voting for any kind of change. They're not taking the carbon tax off. They're not taking any of the other crippling taxes off. They're just reallocating them. He said he was going to take the capital gains tax off. That's what he said, right? I don't even believe he's going to do that. I think it's going to be a bait and switch. I think he's going to come in and say, well, we can't take the capital gains tax off, but we're going to do this instead. And it'll be some other program to spend money instead of actually help people. Bloc leader Blanchette says Carney must call an election as soon as possible to have legitimacy as prime minister, says he must also disclose his assets right away. Yeah, because there's a reason. Dalton McGuinty's brother, David McGuinty, who's one of the Liberal leaders. No, he's the Minister of Public Safety, excuse me. He wants an election as well. Stephen Taylor says Liberal Minister McGuinty wants an election. This is 7 seconds, so we'll listen.
I think right now, what we're looking at here is a united Liberal Party, and frankly, it's time for an election. I think right now...
A united Liberal Party? All 10 of us. Yeah, sure. United Liberal Party. Nobody is interested in what the Liberal Party is offering at this point in time. I think people in Ontario, when Kathleen Wynne was offering whatever she was offering in 2018, nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody had any patience for it. People just wanted her gone. And I feel like people just want these Liberals gone, but they are going to stick around like a cold sore. And it's... Again, frustrating, just frustrated. Juno News says, the good news is you'll be seeing probably more of me than you want, says Carney. Mark Carney speaks with reporters after his first meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau after being selected Liberal Party leader. And yeah, it wasn't really an election, was it? Here's Mark Carney. We'll probably listen to a minute of this. He's not great with the press. He mumbles. There's a lot of inside baseball. Like, it seems like he's saying things in his head or he thinks things are implied. And then responds to those things and then addresses the press. There's a couple of times where he's kind of talking to himself about what he's going to do next. It's weird. He's weird. I don't think he's very good in front of the cameras and things like that. He's certainly not prime ministerial. He's not quick on his feet. He expects a lot from the press, like to give back to him. It's weird. The whole thing's weird. It makes me feel weird just watching it. Anyway, here we go.
Just had a long meeting with the Prime Minister. We discussed the most important issues for our country, obviously including Canada and U.S. relations, issues of national security, and, yes, the transition between the Prime Minister and myself. That transition will be seamless, and it will be quick. Finally, I, as you may have heard, just had a meeting with the caucus. There is tremendous energy in the Liberal caucus. As you saw last evening, this is a united party with full of energy to serve Canadians.
I just wondered about Donald Trump.
Okay, sorry. What would you say? First thing, I'm sure he's not going to sign an order directed at me, David. With respect to President Trump, I'm not yet Prime Minister. His interlocutor is Prime Minister Trudeau, and I look forward to the opportunity.
When are you going to be sworn in?
We will. As I said, I just spoke with the Prime Minister at length on issues around the transition. It'll be quick. We'll be coming back to you soon. The good news is that you will be seeing probably more of me than you want, and you will have other opportunities, and we'll be making an announcement on that. Exactly.
Last question. What did you tell caucus today?
What did I tell caucus today? So this is important. The first thing, I went to caucus today because you start as you mean to go on. And we are a Liberal team, and so it's incredibly important for me to hear directly from the members of caucus the concerns of Canadians on the ground, their priorities. As I said last night, they're the voices of their communities and they're the conscience of the party. There's tremendous energy in that group. We know this is a crucial time for our country. We're united to serve Canadians, and we will build this country.
And where will you run?
It was only the one area here, although I've seen longer speeches where he does more of where there was transition, I think, between two reporters, and he was trying to communicate to both of them, and it seemed like he was kind of talking to himself to me. Anyway, the energy, they want to serve Canadians. Canadians don't want you or them to serve us anymore. We're all sick and tired of the lies and the bullshit, and I don't care how energized the people in the Liberal team room are. I don't give a shit. It doesn't bother me at all, or it doesn't encourage me or anything like that. I don't care. I want them all to go away. All of them have done terrible, awful things. Lockdowns, printing money. They've allowed Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh to destroy the place. They've allowed an invasion, basically, a full-blown invasion. They've allowed fentanyl. They've allowed complete destruction of relationship, very long-standing relationship between the United States and Canada. They have destroyed this country, and I don't want to hear another word from any of them. I want them all to go away. So the only thing I'm interested from hearing about from Carney is an election, and that's it. So it's very, very, very bad that our government is holding Canadians hostage this way, and we should not tolerate it. Absolutely not. But there are going to be a lot of Canadians who do tolerate it, and it's very frustrating. Brian Lilly says when any MP leaves the House of Commons, they're allowed to take their chair with them. I find it a great tradition, one that I support. That said, this is a weird photo of Trudeau leaving with his, also perhaps another sign of a looming election. I don't know why Trudeau being an idiot is a sign of a looming election, but there's Trudeau being an idiot, sticking his tongue out, because I guess that's what he does. He's not wearing blackface because they wouldn't let him, but he wanted to. They said, you can't go out there dressed like that, sir. And he said, okay, but I'm going to do the weird thing with my tongue. And they're like, whatever. Rebel News says Premier Ford congratulates new Liberal leader and next Prime Minister Mark Carney and honors the outgoing Justin Trudeau, who was always willing to put party and ideology aside for the good of the country. What horseshit. Absolute nonsense. He's not put anything aside for the good of the country. He's harmed the country. In fact, later in the show, we're going to talk about how he was meeting with Chinese crime lords in hotels where human trafficked people were giving foot massages and worse. So Justin Trudeau being this paragon of virtue? I don't want to hear it, Doug Ford. Get lost. It's bullshit. And we all know it's bullshit. Okay? Excuse me, but it's just true. Here's CBC Watcher, and apparently the press gallery is trying out gotcha questions today and fails miserably on all the big economic questions of the last 5 years. Carney has been wrong, and I have been exactly right, says Mr. Polyev. So I'll play a minute of Mr. Polyev. Here we go.
Mr. Polyev, what economic and diplomatic experience do you have to go up against Donald Trump?
Oh, quite a lot, actually. So I was the Minister of Jobs and Housing in the Harper government, during which time housing cost half as much as it does today. I helped Mr. Harper cut the GST, cut income tax, cut business tax, and balance the budget. Over my time in Parliament, I've been scrutinizing and studying the books on the Public Accounts Committee, the Operations Committee, the Finance Committee. And if you want any proof that my economic ideas are the best, the Liberals are all trying to pretend that they're copying them right before the election. All the big economic questions of the last 5 years, Mark Carney has been wrong and exactly wrong, and I have been right. I said 5 years ago the money printing would cause inflation. He said deflation was on the horizon. I turned out to be right. I said the carbon tax would drive up food prices, and it did. Drove them up 37% faster in Canada than in the United States of America. I was the first parliamentarian to predict that we would have the inflation crisis, while Carney, Freeland, Trudeau, and others were saying that we would not. I was the first one to be, along with my Conservative colleagues, fighting for pipelines. Pipelines now everyone claims that they support after opposing them for the last 10 years. So if
Was he fighting for pipelines? It's interesting. The showboating about being right is, it matters, because if you are correct in your prediction of the future, then that gives you an advantage to being wrong about it, right? Mark Carney predicted deflation, and Polyev said, no, if we do this, it's going to inflate. And he was right. And so it's not for nothing, right? It's not, he's not just saying, oh, I'm so smart, ha, ha, ha. He says, if we had listened to me, we wouldn't be in this problem now. And he's not wrong about that. Is that going to translate to winning this rigged election? I don't know. I have no idea, but we'll see. He was right. He was right about the predictions. And I mean, people were screaming it. Economists were screaming it. A whole bunch of people were saying, we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't have healthcare and open borders. People are going to come just for the healthcare. We shouldn't do these things. The prediction is, and of course, the prediction of people like Carney are predictions of the globalists, and the globalists are just trying to lie to us to get it to happen, because once it happens, it's very hard to undo. Right? It's very, very difficult to undo. Kirk says, while you weren't paying attention to the Conservative Party of Canada, they did what they do best, screw itself over and its voters over. The CPC let a 24-year-old named Sukhman Gill, who apparently needed a waiver to run as a CPC candidate because he wasn't even a party member. They let him win the Abbotsford South Langley riding, throwing veteran politicians under the bus, and even kicking one out after a year of working the communities. Somehow they were able to sell thousands of memberships in a short period of time. There will be stuff coming out on this soon, I hear. So fraudulently selling memberships is a good way to ensure your candidate gets in. And if your candidate is actually working for India or China or somebody who's not Canadian, then this could be potentially foreign interference, right? Back to Sukhman's campaign. People from Sukhman's campaign spared no time after the win in attacking CPC MP Tamara Jensen, who supported another candidate, her ex-staffer, just because she happens to be a Hindu. People in the communities that are upset with this and the CPC, and it greatly now weakened the CPC's chances in the area. Special interest groups are trying to take over Canada, and all parties, including the CPC and its idiotic inner circle jerk, are handing it over to them on a silver plate. Notice the CPC MPs supporting this. So it's very, very interesting what's going on. And it seems very open. It's not something that's secret or hidden or anything like that. And how do you deal with that? Because it doesn't seem like anybody's actually interested in dealing with representing the people. They're just interested in representing special interests, because the special interest means dollar signs, right? Means funding. Brian Lilly is highlighting this Doug Ford thing. Let's talk about U.S. tariffs. And Doug Ford moves ahead with jacking up American electricity bills in response to Trump's tariffs. So this is a minute long, and I don't like this. I think that I think that Doug Ford is doing everything wrong. Every single step he makes seems wrong and inflammatory. So if we could cool the situation down and just make sure everybody's, like, listen, we don't want to have a war with you about anything. I think that would be better rather than amping it up. And however, I don't know what Trump is going to do. And Ford is using this as trying to be a strongman. And again, I don't think the Ontario economy can win a trade war against the United States economy ever. I think we lose that every day of the week. David said, if America needed an excuse to seriously cause financial hardship in Canada, then Ford's approach to electricity scarcity can definitely be it. I'm not sure why anyone thinks this makes us brave. I agree. I think this whole strategy is wrong. I think, again, every step we've made in responding to this has been wrong. Doug Ford specifically, Justin Trudeau specifically, all of the premiers with the possible exception of Danielle Smith, but she caved almost immediately. Like she caved and went along with Justin Trudeau's idiotic plans very, very quickly too, it seems. So do we have anybody in Canada who's working for us? Doesn't seem like we do. Here's Doug Ford talking about turning off or turning up the price of the electricity to an insane level. Here we go.
We will apply maximum pressure to maximize our leverage. That's why today we're moving forward with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports. For the 1.5 million American homes and businesses that Ontario powers, homes and businesses in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average, this will add around $100 per month to the bills of hardworking Americans. Let me be clear. I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
It doesn't seem like we are being a reliable partner. It doesn't seem like we are fulfilling our end of the bargain. It seems like Trump wanted people or the Canadian government at both levels, provincial and federal, to stop the drugs, fentanyl being created in Canada and shipped to the United States, and stop the illegals pouring in from Canada who are getting over a mostly open border. And so in response to that, we're having total war against their electricity section. It feels like we're doing everything wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm too timid. Maybe I'm like I'm the guy who gets bullied because I'm like, okay, we got to appease the bully, but maybe not appease the bully. Just don't piss the bully off, right? Don't poke the bully in the eye and then claim victim when he punches you in the face, right? Like it doesn't seem like the right move. It seems like we're standing there, and even though the bullies threatened us, if you look at it that way, and I don't really, but I can understand how you can frame it that way, right? Trump said, we're going to tariff you if you don't do these things. So you could look at that like a threat, or you could look at that like, hey, stop doing those stupid things, dummy. And I looked at it more like, stop doing those stupid things, dummy. And we are doing stupid things. So I thought that was an accurate assessment, right? So I didn't see it as being a bully, but other people framed it that way. And fair, if that's the framing, fine. He's doing that to everybody. He's not just doing that to Canada. He's doing it to everybody. And so instead of taking it personally like we are, we need to be smart, I guess. And I think that what we're doing is not smart. I think what we're doing is giving an excuse for Donald Trump to make an excuse or to make an example out of us. And he will. Here's Wab Canoe inflaming this nonsense more. Okay. And I mean, this is not a win. Like this isn't, you're not showing Donald Trump by, pulling the already bought and paid for alcohol off the shelves. Like you're just not. It's not the win you think it is, Wab Canoe. Here's Wab Canoe making fun of Donald Trump.
Okay, this order, it's a wonderful order. It's a beautiful order. This order is pulling American booze off the liquor mart shelves.
Silly. So is this something that you look at and think to yourself, I want politicians who do that. I love petty politicians who exchange barbs with Donald Trump for no good reason at all. It doesn't seem like it's going to help us. It seems like it's going to harm us. Ryan says, this is crazy. These are globalists at work. spinning Canadians up to believe that we will be going to war against the United States. Just look at this post and picture they used. Canadians are under endless psyops. The Globe and Mail, which I used to subscribe to, but don't anymore because I don't want to give them any money. They say, this is an opinion piece, tariffs are only the start. We must buckle down for years of conflict with the United States, right? Like, give me a break. They want years of conflict with the United States. They want to break up the relationship between Canada and the United States. And they've made Canada the absolute craziest X you could possibly imagine, okay? The worst and craziest X you could possibly imagine. So here's Danielle Smith, and she says, today, Premier Doug Ford said one day Alberta might have to give approval for a federal tax on oil and gas headed from Alberta to the United States. I understand our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has mused about the same thing. Let me be clear, Alberta will never agree to such an absurd and self-destructive idea. It's not an option. I'm not going to agree to do something that will cost hundreds of thousands of Albertans and Canadians their jobs almost overnight. That would be like placing export tariffs on Ontario auto parts. Also a bad idea. There are many effective ways that Canada and Alberta can work together to pressure the United States president to change course on tariffs. That's not one of them, period. So yeah, I mean, she's probably right about that. And it's very interesting. Again, I think that it's clear that what Doug Ford is doing and what our leadership is doing in trying to scapegoat and make Donald Trump the bad guy is not helping Canada. And Danielle Smith sees it, and she says, well, we're not going to do this. We're not crossing this red line. If Donald Trump wanted to turn off Line 5, he would decimate Ontario and Quebec. It would be an emergency immediately. If Donald Trump wanted to respond to the electricity tariffs, I feel like if I was going to respond, I would get all of those people off of the Canadian energy grid. I would zero out that grid. I would say, turn it off. We don't need it anymore. And we don't need your car parts. And see you later, Doug Ford, until you want to be the 51st state. Hope you enjoy getting reelected in 4 years. Bye. And then never talk to him again. Maybe that's petty and maybe that's the wrong move or whatever. But I don't think we win this. I think we lose this bigly. And if Donald Trump wanted to pull out the big guns, Doug Ford would be there on his knees begging to turn it back on because he's screwed. And it's like, if you F around, you're going to find out. And we in Ontario may find out because Doug Ford is effing around. Lion Advocacy says companies and individuals who support Mark Carney's, let's move on a little bit. We're going to talk about carbon taxes. And I've got to cut off the stream now. This is going into the paid show. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you tomorrow. And this is on to hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful